These are the best touchdown picks game by game week 12. Starting with Jets Ravens, this is a game Baltimore absolutely has to win. They are a large double-digit home favorite in this one as well. So I think in terms of the most likely, we can feel good about going with Derrick Henry here. 20 touches in each of his last 5 games. Obviously, that big total, he's going to be a big factor here. I think this is the time of the year that we usually start to see Derrick Henry really explode. But I do like Lamar in this game quite a bit from a passing perspective as well. The Jets have been basically a bottom 3 secondary after trading away Sauce Gardner. But what they've done also is they've given up multiple touchdowns to both Joe Flacco and Dylan Gabriel since he left. So Lamar is in a really good spot here. And the one that I think that is going to be taking advantage of that is going to be Mark Andrews. Obviously, that fake tush push last week was a thing of beauty, but he also has a team high 32% of the Ravens end zone targets this year. So considering that Isaiah likely might miss this game, I think that we basically can just default back to this matchup as well. Only the Bengals allow a higher touchdown rate to the position than the Jets. So I'm not overthinking this game. Game number 2, we're going to talk about the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Chicago Bears. I don't love this game from a touchdown perspective, but there are 2 long shots that I think are at least interesting that you guys can choose between. I think that one of DeAndre Swift or Kyle Monangai is going to get in the end zone in this one. Swift is one of those guys that is still seeing a decent amount of work, but it's more of like one of those like Kenneth Walker, Zach Charbonnet type of splits where Charbonnet in that scenario seems to be getting the majority of the touchdowns. I would not be surprised if Kyle Monangai ends up capturing that type of role. Everyone wants to talk about it being closer to like a Gibbs Montgomery thing, but Monangai has out-touched Swift inside the 10-yard line over the last 2 games or since Swift has been back and does have those 2 touchdowns. So if you want to play into that narrative being something that continues, I think Monangai is a decent long shot, but I do think Swift is the most likely to have access to those scoring opportunities, if that makes sense, but not the best touchdown game overall. Patriots and Bengals, the other side of the spectrum, there's a few great picks in this game. I think that one of the things that we should probably highlight, we've been talking about TreVeyon Henderson, I think in this video every single week over the last 3 or 4 weeks, which has been solid. And this is another great spot. Obviously, teams have been just destroying Cincinnati through the air and on the ground, but in particular to running backs, they're just giving up a ton of touchdowns and a ton of production in general, league high touchdown rate in general to the running back position. So love TreVeyon to get into the box again. Also like Drake May through the air, but in particular, I think a decent long shot here is Hunter Henry. The Bengals are allowing a league high touchdown rate to tight ends, which we just talked about. And also, they're basically just trotting out a historically bad defense at this point. Bottom 3 TD rate allowed through the air across the board. So we might even get Joe Burrow back on the other side of this game. So I think it's not that surprising that this could shoot out. I think Drake May obviously in a really good spot to throw a couple touchdowns. I wouldn't be surprised if one goes to Henry through the air. And if we're going to grab someone on the other side, no Jamar Chase, give me T. Higgins with Chase suspended in this one. So everyone wants to talk about Gonzalez, but New England's actually given up some pretty big games to wide receiver ones this year. So I actually think this is still a decent spot with the uptick that Higgins is going to see from a volume perspective. They got shredded for 3 touchdowns by Drake London not too long ago, if you guys remember that. Also in week 10, I believe Emeka Egbuka scored against them. So the wide receiver one has done a little bit of damage. Obviously, they can move him around the field to get him away from Gonzalez as well. But if your fantasy season isn't going how you hoped, this may help. I've teamed up with DraftKings Pick 6, the official daily fantasy sports partner of the NFL, to give you another way to make game day more interesting. Here's exactly how it works. You just pick more or less on 2 or more player stats, passing yards, touchdowns, things like that. Then it's basically you calling how a player performs and seeing your picks come to life on every snap. And here's the part you should know. Right now, new DraftKings customers who play $5 or more get $50 in Pick 6 credits instantly. So if you're new, you play $5 or more and they drop $50 in Pick 6 credits right into your account. All you need to do is download the DraftKings Pick 6 app and use promo code HOLKA to unlock that offer. In partnership with DraftKings Pick 6, the crown is yours. I think this Giants and Lions game also has a couple really strong picks. I think that the first one, in terms of most likely, Jahmyr Gibbs, they've been kind of a target for us all season when it comes to like targeting running backs, but also getting touchdowns on the ground. But the one that I like from a long shot perspective is going to be Amon-Ra St. Brown. He obviously against man coverage, we try and attack him even more. And the Giants are one of the most heavy man teams in the NFL. So against these type of coverages, we basically see Amon-Ra as that first read. 43% target share against man this year, which is pretty insane. Also a team high 46% of the end zone target share, which is really nice. Jared Goff, obviously he's coming off of one of his worst games he's ever had. but I do think that there's no get right spot, potentially like the Giants through the air. Again, heavy man coverage team. He always does better in the dome at home as well. So I wouldn't be surprised if Amon-Ra gets in the box for at least one. This Vikings-Packers game is super interesting, right? Because we have all the McCarthy narratives. Honestly, though, the target share for someone like Justin Jefferson hasn't been terrible. So I think there's probably two long shots in this game. I think Jefferson would be the one that I think is the most appealing because the volume is going to be there no matter what. The issue is really the quality of targets and how well this Green Bay defense has played. So I think that if we were going to go after the most likely touchdown, I do agree that it's Emmanuel Wilson. They've kind of struggled to run the ball in general, even with Jacobs in the lineup. So there's definitely no slam dunk here, but wouldn't be surprised if Emmanuel Wilson gets in the box. They do have a nice total here at home. Indianapolis Colts, we can throw Jonathan Taylor in there every single week as our most likely touchdown scorer. Don't really need any more analysis there. But the long shot, I think, is probably relatively straightforward, but Rashee Rice is still getting a little bit disrespected, in my opinion, for how he's being schemed around the red zone. So two tough road matchups, obviously, Buffalo and Denver over the last 2 weeks. I think that Patrick Mahomes could really bounce back here, mostly because the Colts' lack of a pass rush. I think he's going to have all the time in the world back there. And I think there's plenty of time for him to get Rice involved around the goal line. So I think that's one of the ones that I like the most when it comes to long shots this week. Seattle and Tennessee. Again, this one is kind of straightforward. I think that JSN, if you're not going to go after Charbonnet or Kenneth Walker, which I think are both interesting as well, JSN is the one that I feel the best about just because Tennessee has been one of the worst teams in the NFL at slowing down opposing wide receiver ones, bottom three in that category. So I think JSN gets in the box here. Hopefully they can push them hard enough to where the target share and the target volume is there. I know you guys got to get your touchdown picks, but if you want the picks for this video early, you can get it for free. Just go to touchdownpicks.com, put in your email right here, and I will send them over to you. So this is one of those situations where I have to post this video later in the week, but my touchdown model is available much earlier. So I wanted to figure out a way to get this to you guys absolutely free. Like I said, there's a link in the description, also touchdownpicks.com, and I'll send them over to you, and then you'll get them the rest of the season as well. Jacksonville and Arizona. Yeah, Travis Etienne, I would give him as like my most likely to score in this game. I think it's kind of interesting how Jacksonville's been leaning into the run, and Arizona has really struggled to defend the run. So that one's pretty straightforward. But I do really like Trey McBride. Again, I feel like we've been talking about him a lot. He scored a TD in the last 5 games. And what's interesting is that's the exact time that Jacoby Brissett took over at quarterback. So only Jonathan Taylor and Christian McCaffrey have scored more fantasy points per game over that stretch. And yeah, the matchup is pretty elite. The Jags are a bottom 3 team at defending tight ends. So love McBride to get into the box yet again this week. Make it 6 in a row. Cleveland and Las Vegas Raiders. I like Brock Bowers in this game. I feel like we've talked about a lot of tight ends today, but it is a really good week from a matchup perspective for a bunch of the top guys. The Browns play man coverage at the 2nd highest rate in the NFL. And Bowers also happens to have massively positive splits against those looks. Team high 35% target share. So as good as the Cleveland defense has been, they've also allowed the 4th highest TD rate to tight ends. So really like Brock Bowers to get in the end zone. Philly and Dallas. Yeah, I think that we have to go back to Javonte Williams here as the most likely. He did score again, or I guess he scored twice the last time these teams played back in week 1, even though he only had 64 yards on the ground. I think that he's going to continue to have that role, and it looks like this is going to be another spot where I think he's a pretty likely touchdown scorer. Saquon is the wild card for me here. He did score against them as well in week 1, but they did hold him to 60 yards on 18 attempts. He was able to kind of get there through the air. That's where he caught his touchdown. So I think that there's a chance that Saquon has a really nice day here from like a fantasy perspective if he can get in the end zone. So I think that he's as good a long shot as any. Potentially getting another one through the air would be nice. Falcons and Saints. Bijan Robinson is going to be my most likely. I think that Algier thing was a little bit overblown. The Saints have been like just okay against the run. Not bad, not good. But what's been hurting them is these type of running backs that can be really good through the air, but also they're just facing a ton of volume because they're playing from behind so often. So I think if we can get Bijan a bunch of touches through the air or on the ground, really strong bet to score a touchdown. The long shot here, I think, is Chris Olave. They don't really have a ton of weapons or a ton of talent, but the Falcons have been giving up some pretty big games to wide receivers. They got destroyed by Jalen Waddle. Demario Douglas went off for 100 yards. Alec Pierce scored a touchdown. Ted McMillan scored 2 touchdowns. So it's really interesting. Obviously, they play a ton of cover 3 as well. We've talked about that a lot, and Olave leads the Saints with a 34% 4% target share against cover 3. So I think that the volume will still continue to be there for him. This Tampa and Rams game is fun on Sunday night. I think the most likely is going to be Kyren Williams. He got in the end zone first last week, which was nice, but the Rams is a heavy favorite. Do like Kyren as the most likely. The long shot is going to be Davante Adams. You can make an argument that he's the most likely. Last week was interesting. He only had 1 catch on his 8 targets, but it was a touchdown from 1 yard out. He's been scoring these touchdowns from like inside the 5 at just a rate that I haven't seen in forever. So he's a league high 19 end zone targets. No other Ram is even close to that.